Matt, there is an article in Telegraph written by Richard Capt. He's talking about tired Zelensky looks too weak to achieve victory. The question is what Zelensky could have done to win this war against Russia. Was that possible in your opinion? And why they're so brutal when it comes to Zelensky?
Well, the only way they could have won was not to have fought this war at all. Certainly, Zelensky was elected uh, quite popularly, about 70%, if I remember correctly. And he was campaigning on a peace platform, though. He was saying he was going to go and he was going to meet with Vladimir Putin, and they were going to work out and come to an agreement on a plan to end the fighting, end the war that had been occurring in eastern Ukraine since 2014, and primarily that would have been through, uh, the utilization of the Minsk II Accords, which had been agreed upon 2015, if I remember correctly, but had been abandoned in many ways, never even taken up by the sides, particularly the Western side. So Zelensky had the opportunity to not even fight this war, which would have been the only way to win it. And then, of course, in the months prior to Russia's invasion in the end of 2021, Russia put forward one last attempt at diplomacy, and that was rejected out of hand by the West. And so then, after Russia's invasion, you saw this. You saw these negotiations occur first in Belarus and then in Turkey, facilitated by the Israelis, facilitated by the Germans. In particular, the former Israeli PM Natalie Bennett, excuse me, and the former German Chancellor Gerhard Schroeder. So you had a real attempt in the first weeks after Russia's invasion to come to a peace deal, to end the fighting and to come to a diplomatic or political solution. And that, of course, was rejected. The Ukrainians were pulled out of that by the West, in particular the US and the UK. So Zelensky had opportunities to have never even fought this war or to have ended it as quickly as it began or within a month or two's time of its beginning. And that was rejected. Zelensky followed the commands of London and of Washington, D.C. In particular. So that what might have been is what stalks and haunts this war, as we've seen this slaughter, as we've seen this destruction, and as we see like almost a helplessness of ending this conflict unless it becomes politically desirous or politically advantageous in either London or in Washington, D.C., both, I guess, for the war to come to a negotiated end. It won't. And what you've also seen, though, too, is the reason why Zelensky backs out of these things, why Zelensky doesn't go forward with the peace attempts that he had campaigned upon, is because one, the pressure from the West, and again, mainly from London and from Washington, D.C., but also, too, within Ukraine, the strength of the far right, of the ultranationalists, of the neo-Nazis, how much, even though they are small in numbers, how much political power they have. A lot of that comes from foreign backing, but also too now they received a boost in the form of Russia's invasion, right? I mean, so you've got these people who are going on and on about the great threat from the East, and then the threat from the East show up. People start listening to them. See, people start following them. People start joining them. So, I mean, if you look at this war and you say, well, who's gained from this? Certainly the far right, the ultranationalists, the neo-Nazis in Ukraine have gained in a number of ways. So Zelensky had been put in that position or got put in this position where when he comes into office, he's confronted by these two power bases, both of them not truly representing the people of Ukraine, but both of them with real significant actual power. And the far right says to Zelensky, if you go forward with these attempts to make peace with Russia, you'll be hanging from that tree, or they showed him a gun, or they threatened him. And the same thing too with the West. Washington and London, said this is, the route we can go here is like as in 2014. We can remove you from power just as we removed others from power, and that's not an idle threat. And what the West, though, also brings, though, is this idea that we will back you and we will make you a hero of our time. We will make you the Churchill of our time. And that's what you've heard him described as, the Churchill of our time. And so all of that propels Zelensky into a much more antagonistic, adversarial position with Russia. And then, of course, believing, as we've seen various media reports detailed, particularly in the last few months, that he has almost a messianic type vision of himself, that he truly does believe all the propaganda, all the public relations that were built around him, that he was the Churchill of his time, of our time, and that has come to really infest his mind. I mean, that's the reports we're receiving. We can never really know what's going on inside someone's head, but you certainly can see by his actions, by the way he talks, by his belief that he can win this war, and possibly he alone can win this war. So what that all means, though, for the people of Ukraine is that unless there is the presence of the West in determining, look, this war is going to come to an end, that this war continues on in its savage, terrible nature, with just mass killing along the front, a continued pounding of cities from time to time, deprivation, environmental destruction, but then also, too, the really great threat of continued escalation, coupled for the Ukrainians with the threat of collapse. If the Western money, particularly the American money, does not continue to show up, the Ukrainian economy, the Ukrainian government, all Ukrainian society will collapse, because that is what is keeping it upright. That's what keeping it afloat. That's what's keeping the house of cards from collapsing. So it's a terrible, horrible situation. How we got here is understandable. It's not opaque. We can see clearly how this arrived, just as we can clearly see how you get out of this, and how you get out of this, or how we're not there, but how the Ukrainians get out of this is a negotiated settlement with the Russians to end the killing, end the destruction, and hopefully get into a path then that in the future offers some type of political uh, political resolution to the issues in eastern Ukraine. But right now, any negotiated settlement seems simply to be that the Russians will keep what they've taken.
There is another article in Politico. It says that the war in Ukraine may be lost in the first half of 2024. We know that when Politico says this, it means something. It means that the political support from the US can be reduced drastically. In your opinion, what's the plan on the part of the Biden administration? What are they planning for, in your opinion, in Ukraine?
Like so many other American wars of this century, and also too of the last century, hope seems to be the overwhelming and most essential part of their plan. Hopefully something happens. Maybe this will occur if we just keep at it long enough. If we persevere, we keep throwing the money at it. We don't leave. We persist. Hopefully something will change. Maybe something will change. We will get a break. This may happen. All just a strategy of hope that is, history tells us, will not work. And I think that's what you see with Washington's plan right now, with the Biden administration's plan in Ukraine. Hopefully get the money through Congress. I think they likely will get their money through Congress, the $60 billion. It's too much of a gravy train, too much of a trough for the defense contractors for them to let that go. So the Biden administration is hoping that the defense contractors put so much pressure on the Republicans that they bend and they say, okay, we're going to do this one time. They're only going to get this, and then that's it, right? But enough to get the Ukrainians through at least November 2024, through the American elections, so that there's not this collapse, because it's not just the artillery shells and the bullets for rifles and all the munitions that need to go to an army that's fighting a war. It's the money that's going into the economy. It's the money that's paying the government salaries. That's what's keeping Ukraine from collapsing. If you have that money, if that money disappears, or even just it becomes credible that the threat of the money is going to disappear, you will have a collapse, just as we saw it happen in Afghanistan. So in Afghanistan, 6-8 months before the Taliban victory, before the money is actually turned off from Washington, D.C., the $300 million a day the Americans were spending there. The rumor was that it was coming to an end. The threat that it was coming to an end. So you have this kleptocracy, basically, but you have this, when the people at the top are afraid that they're going to not be getting any more, they stop pushing the money down. They stop passing the money down, and then that incites panic. And so this is why you heard in February 2021, March 2021, Afghan army and Afghan police units not receiving their pay, let alone not receiving food or ammunition, because those at the top had stopped passing down because they are afraid nothing more was going to be coming in. And that's what can occur in Ukraine. And so that, I think, the priority right now for the Biden administration is to ensure that this money, this support, this positive pressure that's inflating this balloon in Ukraine continues. The hope also as well that there's no collapse, that the manpower issues, the munition issues, the ammunition supply issues Ukraine is facing will not reach a catastrophic point. The hope is that Vladimir Putin and the Russians don't see a need to push this war further, that they either don't escalate it horizontally, of course, or vertically, so in a sense of bringing the war farther abroad into Europe or bringing in bigger and greater weapons. So there's a hope there, but there's also the hope too that the Russians are okay with what they've taken so far, that the Russians had limited goals, despite what has been said about the Russians wanting to conquer all of Ukraine and wanting to march on Berlin and Paris, and the idea that is that, okay, they've got what they want. They've got control of a large chunk of the Russian-speaking population. They've got their buffer zone. This is territorially what they are okay with. That's the hope, right? And the hope is that the Russians won't put themselves in a position where they've been overextended, because they have not done that. Even that, and when they go after Kyiv at the beginning of the war in 2022, or the beginning of the invasion in 2022, that's, to me, and many others as well, the Russians have never said. The one thing about this is the Russians have always been very tight-lipped. But the idea that they're trying to conquer and capture Kyiv with only 25 or 30,000 troops doesn't seem very likely. It seems more likely that they are, basically trying to put their hand on their opponent's throat, their adversary's throat, their enemy's throat, in order to force them to negotiate, which was successful until the Americans and the British pulled the Ukrainians out, as we discussed. So there's a lot of hope that is driving the American, strategy here, if you can even call it that. There is I think, a great sense of relief in the White House and the Biden campaign that when the war in Gaza happened, it distracted from the war in Ukraine, certainly not in a way that's going to be beneficial, of course, to the Biden campaign, but it showed, I think, that the Ukraine war can drop off of American televisions. It can drop out of the American political and media conversation, and most Americans won't mind. Most Americans won't notice. I don't think MSNBC is getting phone calls, every hour from people wanting to know, where's the Ukraine coverage? So I think there is this hope that the war will just continue to be in the background. in that it won't be occupying American minds. It won't be occupying American attentions. Americans will not be voting on it in November. And so keep this thing going, keep it inflated. If you can get some type of deal with the Russians, possibly I can see the Americans taking that. How intransigent the Ukrainians will be on that is another conversation. But I think politically for the Americans right now, if they could say sometime, in the next couple of months, in the spring, the summer, what have you, get a deal with the Russians to end the fighting, because this way the spin can be, we stopped Vladimir Putin and his hordes. We stood up to the tyrant. We stopped him. He wasn't able to advance more than 60 miles or whatever into Ukraine, right? We protected Kyiv. We kept him at 80% of the country safe, and we stopped him from advancing into the Baltics, into Germany, marching on Paris, etc., crossing the Channel. If it wasn't for us, they'd be speaking Russian in London today. That will be the spin that will be used. So, but again, it all is predicated on this strategy of hope, which, is, one of the key aspects or key, pillars of American foreign policy strategy.
We've seen that China tried to cut a deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia to bring this long-term conflict between these two countries, Shia and Sunni. There were a lot of complications, a lot of difficulties in this deal. And Russia right now is trying to cut a deal between Azerbaijan and Armenia. They have a lot of problems in that region.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to the US, we don't see such a behavior. We don't see that they're looking for some sort of political settlement. Ukraine was a very important case for this comparison. And right now in Gaza, and the US, the Biden administration, the people who are in power, they're not taking care of these negotiations, this political settlement. In your opinion, has the US lost its role as a superpower to bring everything to some sort of sanity, some sort of negotiations?
I think when people look back and they say, when did the unipolar error really end? What was like the key event that, the tipping point where there was no going back to it? I think this past year will have been it. Whether it's as you said, a year ago, if we were having this conversation, Nima, you're like, I predict that there's going to be a rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia. I'd be like, good for you, man. I like your optimism, but certainly there was, but then also too, with the stupidity of the Ukraine war, and then your point about what's happening though and the thing about the Ukraine war too, the naked ambitions of it, right? The naked imperial ambitions. I mean, you can make the argument. I mean, I don't agree with it, but you can make the argument. But as you said, it's their near peer powers. These are large countries, and you can make that argument that that's why it's important. That's why the United States is involved. Don't agree with it, but you can make that argument. The issue with Israel and Gaza, though, Israel and Palestinians, is just such a overt, an obscene form of subjugation, of punishment, of trying to keep an order, an illegitimate and illegal order in place, right? And that is so revolting. And so I think when you look back at 2023, I think this will be when people will say, look, this is when the multipolar idea really was solidified, that there was no turning back at this point. I mean, the idea with Israel and the Palestinians, the American role in it, the fact that the Americans, just again, over the weekend, Joe Biden, big campaign, or yesterday, I guess it was, big campaign stop in South Carolina. And, I mean, his comments, his protestations that we are doing everything we can. We're being really forceful with the Israelis behind the scenes to stop the slaughter, to be careful in their bombing, to not indiscriminately kill civilians. as we know, 2 or 3 plane loads of bombs arrived in Israel that day, because that's what we're sending. We're sending 2 or 3 C-17s full of bombs and missiles and rockets and shells every day to Israel. And every third or fourth day, a cargo ship shows up full of that stuff. And so the world sees that. The world understands that. And the disrespect that the U.S. shows the entire world, not just with its complete enabling support of what Israel is doing, its allowance of what Israel is doing, but then the lying, right, the gaslighting, the manipulation that's going on, that the attempt to manipulate, and see how the United States has obstructed things in the UN. Certainly, we're going to see how the United States is going to handle the South Africa's claim of genocide again in the International Court of Justice. I mean, the Americans have effectively neutered the International Criminal Court in a number of ways, whether by threatening, one, by not being a party to the Rome Statute, but also too by threatening to sanction any of the ICC staff, judges, prosecutors, researchers, investigators, whoever, who do anything that the Americans don't like. So will we see the same? I think so, with the ICJ, where the United States Congress will say, you know what we're going to do? We're going to pull out the funding that we provide to the UN that would go to the ICJ. And we're also going to take an extra chunk to punish the UN. I mean, this has happened with the Americans before. Where I live in North Carolina was the home state of Senator Jesse Helms, who was famous for his hatred for the United Nations, and oftentimes, sometimes successfully, held back money from the UN in an attempt to cripple it. And so we will see things like that, but the world sees that and the world understands it. And so why would you not go with a different world order? Because what you're looking at right now is so risky to go along with the United States and order. When will it be your turn to be on the outs? Or when will something occur that will have such a dramatic effect on your country that, so, I mean, where we're going to go from here in terms of how the world is ordered and structured, and it will be, I want to say it'll be slow, but sometimes it's not slow. Is that great quote from Vladimir Lenin? That decades go by and nothing happens, and sometimes weeks go by and decades happen. And so maybe we will see a rapid reordering of the world quicker than anyone expected, or maybe this plays out slowly over decades, but we are going to see it.
Right now, they're talking about the rapes of young Israeli women. How did you find it? Is there any fact out there to prove this type of rapes?
I think they're taking isolated occurrences, events, and trying to create a storyline to condemn an entire people. Right. So you would have, certainly there well may have been rapes occur on October 7th. I'd be surprised if there weren't. But they weren't, it wasn't an orchestrated rape campaign. It wasn't systematic. It wasn't utilized as a weapon. There weren't marching orders to the Hamas fighters that you will rape your way through these towns and villages. But what I think occurred was that as other Gazans came out to join the fighting, to join the pillaging, to join the attacks on these Israeli towns and villages and military bases as well, that rapes occurred. How could they not? I'd be surprised if they didn't. But again, it wasn't orchestrated, it wasn't systematic, it wasn't part of the plan. And in fact, the Washington Post, as I forget who it was who noted it, I think one of the guys from the Gray Zone, that the Washington Post retracted a statement from Yoav Gallant, the Israeli defense minister, who had alleged that. So if you go back and look at the Washington Post reporting, there are, the defense minister of Israel is saying, we've heard through interrogations of prisoners that rape was part of the plan. Well, the Israelis called the Washington Post and said, please take that out, because it's not true. And you've seen one story after another fall flat. There was this New York Times story, big New York Times story, a week and a half ago or so, about Hamas's use of rape as a weapon, and aspects of that continue to fall through, most notably that the woman who was the highlight of the story spent about a third of the articles about this one woman. And after the story came out, the woman's family said, we were manipulated by the New York Times. We didn't know this was what was going to be about. And further, we have seen no evidence that she was raped. And what many, like Max Blumenthal, who's in Aaron Mate, two journalists who've been doing great work on this, have been showing is that, yes, these people were killed. This was horrible. This was just absolutely horrible, what occurred, but they weren't raped. And I think that the reason why the idea is that, one, rape paints, it gets into all aspects of white psychology, of different parts of white colonialism, about the savage and brutal brown and black people, right? This gets back into 300, 400, 500 years of Western thinking towards the rest of the world, whether it's colonialism, whether it's a genocide, whether it's the white man's burden, however it is, this idea of painting the other as savage, as someone who's going to come and take your children and rape your women, is something that they're trying to achieve here in painting the Palestinians this way, to, manufacture sympathy, to keep that sympathy, to allow for genocide to be excused, right? So this is a part of a very well funded and well resourced. I won't say well orchestrated, because parts of it keep getting exposed, parts of it keeps blowing up. They have to keep shifting. But the idea is that to paint the Palestinians as worse than the Israelis. Well, yes, we may be bombing them, and we may have killed 23,000 of them, with many thousands more in the rubble. We may be starving them. We may be letting them freeze and get sick in the cold and the wet. We may be allowing disease to run rampant or begin to run rampant through Gaza. We may be killing the journalists. We may be killing all the doctors and nurses and ambulance drivers. And we may be killing their poets and playwrights and actors. But at least we're not raping them en masse. We're not raping them as part of an organized campaign. We're not savage like that. We're modern. We're killing them with JDAMs and hellfires. They're raping women. I mean, so it's all an attempt to try and force this construct of us versus them, of the other, and in many ways very similar to the arguments used against Russia over the last couple of years. And so it's one of those things you sit back and you just say, my God, you think it's as horrible as this is, they're making it even more sickening, because as horrible as terrible as what occurred on October 7th was, they are manufacturing and they are creating and they're making up things to make it seem even more horrible, so that the genocide can either be excused or ignored or abetted.
Israel's finance minister said there are 2 million Nazis in Gaza. When they go with such a line, do they really believe that? And who's gonna buy such an argument?
Well, the Nazi line is tried and true. It's effective. It's been used successfully for 80 years in the West to characterize and demonize anyone that you don't want to negotiate with, anyone you don't want to talk to, anyone that you don't want to give anything into. All you want to do is kill them. All you want to do is eradicate them. All you want to do is take from them. Because in Western, to include Eastern Europe and Russia mindsets, you can't talk to Nazis. You can only kill them. And that's inculcated in us, and that is how we have been conditioned to respond to that term, and so it's very effective. And the number of, if you look at American foreign policy, the number of people who have been deemed Hitler just in my lifetime, I don't think I have enough fingers on my hands to, right, whether it's Milosevic, Saddam Hussein, Muammar Gaddafi, Vladimir Putin, now Yahya Sinwar. I mean, so it's on and on and on. It's very effective. And do they believe it? I think there's such hatred there's such religious hatred that is not even based in religion itself, except for this reading of the Hebrew Bible, Old Testament, that, turns the God of Israel into a magical real estate agent in the sky, giving land to people who he likes and people he doesn't like. I mean, that's what they had. That's how they have read the Bible, the Hebrew Bible. That's how they have deconstructed or arrived at this point. But there's such hatred of a religious nature, a religious hatred, even though it's based upon, again, nonsense, among the Israeli right, the religious right, the reactionary right. The Israelis also have a nationalist right as well, which I think is primarily composed of their former security people, their former military, their intelligence people, the Likud party, basically, although it bleeds into more centrist groups as well. But this ultra nationalism, this reactionary nationalism, which is separate, I think, from the religious, the reactionary religious elements that compose the settlers, those who do feel it is their life's purpose to take this land back for their people, for their God. And so people like Bezalel Smotrich, the finance minister, who's been saying these types of things for years and years. I don't know about his early life, but certainly in his adult life. I don't think he is doing this in a cynical way. I don't think he is, a politician in the sense that they'll say anything to get elected kind of thing. I think this is who he really is. He's a settler himself. I think this is what he really believes. And we have to understand that as we pull apart these things, dissect it, analyze it, that there are people who really believe what they say, who what they are speaking is their truth. And so I really do think that people like Bezalel Smotrich, Itmar Ben-Gvir, the heritage and agriculture ministers of the Israeli cabinet, and others who have said genocidal things, really believe that. They really do believe that the best way forward, not just for them politically, that calculation is certainly there too, but best way forward for Israel, for their people, is the eradication of the Palestinians. They view the Palestinians as lesser. They view them as subhuman. They view them as pests occupying a land that need to be exterminated. So the same way you have this invasive species in your house, termites or whatever, you have to eradicate it. There's no way of getting rid of, there's no way of dealing with them. There's no way of living with them. And so I think these people really do believe this. And then you have, again, other elements within Israeli society, just as you do, when you look at American foreign policy, it's just not one group of people. It's a whole bunch that come together with different motives, different rationales, different ambitions, different, and you have that in Israel as well. And ultimately, though, it does come together in this desire for ethnic cleansing. And whether it's because of, say, with like the security types, the Likud party types, it's a desire for more land, for more space, for a greater Israel. And many of them also believe in the political benefits of Zionism, on individual, institutional, national levels. And then this intersection then with the religious right, with the settler class, with the ultra Orthodox and all the others. I mean, you have this that comes together where ethnic cleansing is the way forward. This is the best plan for us. I think it's a catastrophic strategic mistake for Israel long term. But in the short and midterm, they can make arguments to themselves that justify it, that make sense. Expanding this war into Lebanon. The Washington Post just had a story, something a lot of people have been saying for, last 3 months, for Netanyahu to survive politically, he needs to expand the war into Lebanon. I mean, so there's a short-term political calculations, but then there's also those who are saying that this is what we do. We need to advance to the Litani River. We need to create a buffer zone. We need to do the same, on and on. Then we need to take Judea and Samaria, which is their term for the West Bank, some of it to fulfill the Zionist ambitions, some of it to fulfill what God wants, and others were saying because it's best for our security just to take it, flush these people out, control it, and put up more walls.
Matt, to wrap up this session, I want to talk about this huge military buildup in the Red Sea that is a direct consequence of this conflict in Gaza. When the United States went to the Red Sea together with Israel, we were thinking that Saudi Arabia and UAE would participate, would support this. They didn't support it. We had European countries as well. They were not that excited to be part of this operation. How do you see the situation right now in the Red Sea? Are we going to have some sort of escalation? This is just a military buildup to bring some sort of political settlement. How do you find the situation right now?
Yeah, I think a lot of us were surprised that Saudi Arabia and UAE didn't join in. That would be the obvious thing. They fought this war in Yemen for almost 10 years now, 2015. Right? I mean, so why would they not join in? This is their common enemy, right? I mean, so, but they obviously see that the Saudis and the Emiratis obviously see that this is not the right way forward. That even though we've been fighting a war in this country for going on 9 years now, fighting these very same people, this is not the way forward. This is going to be a mistake. This is going to have consequences that are going to be negative, let alone unpredictable or offshoots into whatever. But also, too, we've had a peace deal for almost 2 years that not perfect, but hey, it's really pretty good. A lot of people are not being killed as they were 2 years ago. As well as is they also, I think, realize the futility of what they have tried. We tried to beat these people. We bombed the hell out. We starved them for almost 9 years, and they won. They basically won. They've got most of, they got most of Yemen's population is behind them, and et cetera, et cetera. Our puppets have to live, our puppets of South Yemen have to live in Riyadh. Yeah, I mean, so I think you just that alone tells you everything you should know about what's occurring here. If the Saudis and Emiratis aren't going along with it, with all they've been through, it's probably because it's a really bad idea, and they would rather step back and watch this than participate. And you saw it too. You've seen some European countries drop out of this coalition. I think France dropped out, among others, and then other Western nations dropped in. The Australians jumped into it. The Australians love to talk about people who have just want to be part of the club. So the Australians jumping feet first into this potential quicksand with us. And the idea, though, that everyone keeps coming back to, and everyone talks, not everyone, but people who are sane and reasonable and logical, is that this all ends, including the attacks on the Americans in Iraq and Syria and everything else, all ends if the U.S. gets Israel to stop its slaughter. If the genocide stops, all this stops. And the disconnect in the U.S. on this, in the U.S. media and in Washington, D.C. is enormous. The cognitive dissonance on this is just, it's you think you've seen it all, and then you see this. You struggle to really hold it together when dealing with these kinds of things, because it's just so mad. It's so crazy that, you can have reports in the American press. You can have American officials being interviewed, American politicians being interviewed about this crisis in the Red Sea, and there be no connection made between what's happening in Gaza. It's just completely ignored. And so I think ultimately we come back to, well, what is this for? What's this about? Standing in solidarity with Israel. Why are we standing in solidarity with Israel? Because it's best for domestic politics in the U.S. as the politicians see it. There may be a whole heck of a lot of trouble in terms of protests, Joe Biden getting shouted down in churches, marvelous civil actions in New York City yesterday, shutting down 3 or 4 bridges and tunnels and everything. I mean, really well done civil disobedience work. But at the end of the day, the money is all behind the Israel lobby, and that's what the vast bulk of American politicians are going to listen to, even at the local and state levels, not just at the federal level. So this even as it produces a calamity, even if it continues to cause Israel to have to bleed out economically, because Israel's economy over the last 3 months is really taking a hard hit for a number of reasons from this war with the Palestinians. Even though the solution is so simple, And the solution, ending the genocide, isn't just morally correct. It absolutely is, but it's just not that. Strategically, it's correct. Where does Israel think it's going with this, except for the ethnic cleansing route? But where do you think that what will happen from there? Um, so this, whatever the Red Sea brings in terms of catastrophe, calamity, further crisis, an enlarged war, you know. It's all being done, in my opinion, because of American domestic politics, because people are afraid that Lindsey Graham is going to go on Meet the Press and is going to say bad things about them. That, you know, if he's going to and Democrats will feel like they're not tough enough. And then they'll feel that by not standing in solidarity with Israel, that AIPAC and the other Israel lobby, DMFI, Democratic Majority for Israel, which is a PAC that has dumped, in the last election cycle, dumped millions upon millions, I think $30 million in U.S. House of Representative races, which is a tremendous amount of money. Turn the races here in North Carolina. DMFI came into 2 races in the primary stages, so not even in a general election, working against the progressive candidates, Erica Smith in the 1st district, Anita Alam in the 4th district here in North Carolina. Put hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars into these races, ensuring that pro-Israel candidates won the Democratic primaries. And so that's what people in DC, as well as people, again, at the state levels, are terrified of. And so it's better to go along with what everyone agrees with is a stupid, ineffectual, and potentially catastrophic policy of fighting the Yemenis in the Red Sea on behalf of a genocide than risking the political backlash that might occur.